Hi, everybody. I'm Marley. As Read Across America's ambassador, I hope to help the National Education Association spark a love of reading among readers of all ages and foster community around diverse books. When people talk about books together, their understanding of each other grows. That's why I'm excited to make a reading connection today and talk with the amazing award-winning author, Jacqueline Woodson. How are you doing?
I'm good, Marley. It's so good to see you.
Thank you. I was telling everybody I make my college decision tomorrow. My announcement is tomorrow, and I'm really
Oh,
excited and nervous.
we are
Um,
waiting. I know we're
the
gonna
world
choose.
is waiting. I'm waiting. I don't even know. But my first question to you is that you say you knew you wanted to be a writer from a very early age, which is super important for kids to hear because they often feel that way too. So what was it like for you growing up and trying to accomplish your dream? And how did you find your voice? I know there's a great story about you being a little bit of a liar, I've heard.
Yeah, I definitely love making up stories, and I definitely got in trouble for making up stories, and my mom definitely called it lying. But I just loved the actual art of. I loved what happened when I told people stories, and I loved what happened to myself when I told stories. When I like grabbed this thing out of nowhere and it became this tangible story. And it was what brought me the most joy. And I think one thing that happened when you're young is you have your adults in your ear thinking about their own backstories and what would bring them joy through you. And for me, my mother's joy and her relief would have been for me to get a job, to have like a very steady income, and because that's what she understood. That was her journey. But for me, I knew that I was going to pursue what made me happy, and telling stories was definitely what made me happy.
So the title we're here to talk about is the year we learned to fly. And you have so many stories that we could talk about, but are you still learning to fly? Is this a journey that, comes out of, it doesn't end at, the age that we're young? And what are your suggestions for kids of all ages? Because we know that this process of development doesn't just end when we're kids or when we go to high school or when we graduate.
Such a great question. I am always learning to fly. I will always be learning to fly. If there's some writer that I love who's teaching a class, I will take that writer's class. I am constantly reading writers and reading a lot of poetry to learn how to write better. I'm constantly eavesdropping and listening for story everywhere. I'm constantly trying new genres to see if I could write inside of them. But it is always like right now I'm working on something that is leaving me feeling very wingless. And for me, the journey is to growing my wings through figuring out how to tell this story. So when I go back to writing later on tonight, I'm going back to that journey. And it is a lifelong journey, the way learning is. And again, coming back to why I chose writing is because I knew it was going to be this lifelong journey. And even when I'm feeling wingless, I'm not without joy.
I think a huge part of what you just touched on is really important for kids and for communities, which is the aspect of learning and having this constant curiosity and desire to both fail and succeed. And I think it's really the best place to spark those conversations for kids can be in schools, because we spend so much time in these environments where we're constantly trying to learn how to fly in our own ways. So what do you think that, educators can do to help kids realize that their imaginations are limitless? Because it's oftentimes one of the biggest roadblocks to getting self-expression out of kids, to hear their work and to hear their voice, because they feel like maybe I can fly, but only these many feet, only this far, and under these conditions. So what can educators do to be a part of this process?
Well, educators set the tone in the classroom, and they let the young people know if they do have wings, if their choices are limitless. And they do that, of course, through their classroom libraries, through their pedagogy, through the use of their pronouns and the way they talk about families, all the ways in which young people feel themselves being seen. And I say again and again, it's so important for teachers to see their students, to know who their students are. I was a really slow reader. And we look back on it, and I was a slow reader because I was an engaged reader, and I was reading to become a writer, and I was reading like a writer, but teachers didn't always see that. They were like, come on, catch up, catch up. And I think it's hard when you have a class of 30 or when you have a class of 25 even to be able to see each of those students. But you owe them that. And I think so many teachers, that is their gift, is being able to see every single one of their students and see what their brilliance is, because every young person has some brilliance. It's just about us recognizing it and affirming it.
Yeah, the affirmation aspect is really important to kids' education. I mean, my parents always affirmed me, and I think that's one of the things that when they find kids find out that I had like a list of affirmations that I had memorized that always told me that I was destined for greatness or that I had these possibilities. It really unlocked my ability to think that I can do whatever I want if I have this sort of dream and this passion and this support. And I think for a lot of kids, their support is sometimes missing in their own education. And for some young readers, The Year We Learned to Fly might be their first introduction to the history of enslavement ever. That sometimes the stories that we tell are so often, authors particularly, are telling stories that are sometimes censored in schools or are told in ways that are either incorrect or are hard, or are not the truth really of what happened. So what ideas do you have for how adults and educators can use this story to talk to young kids of all races about enslavement, and understanding that this is an experience that has impacted our country more than just the people who look like us?
Yeah, the story of enslavement is everybody's story. And I think that's one of the ways that as a young person, I was mistaught it, right? It was Black people were slaves, not that white folks had come along and wanted to enslave Black and brown bodies, like, which is a very different way of talking about something. And I think with The Year We Learned to Fly, it's so important to read the story to the young people. And in this case, I think they will lead that conversation, because whenever I read, I'm not trying to be didactic at all, but you get to that point where you see where the young people got their wings. And it's just this thing that the grandmother passes on, and it's not trying to, bring a hammer to the narrative, but it's like, this is what we carry inside of us. These are the ancestors we carry, and all of us carry ancestors. And that's the beautiful thing about being alive. And I guarantee when the story is read, the young people are going to start asking the questions. And for the educators, it's about answering them. And again, like you said, affirming them, right? Affirming. My family came to this country through enslavement, and I'm grateful that they survived, because if they had not survived and if they had not had that tenacity to survive, I wouldn't be here telling stories. And the idea that we were brought here not meant to survive, and that we did, is Black brilliance, is beauty, is so many things. And I think the young people will bring their own experiences to the narrative and begin having conversations that as adults, sometimes we lead, sometimes we step out of the way and set the tone for those conversations.
That's great that I appreciate you putting young people at the forefront and actually saying that that's a huge tip I would always give to adults, and trying to see how will kids feel about something. How will we have to sometimes let them lead. And I think that a huge part of that, and I relate to it, is through social justice, through having these understandings of enslavement and of my history and the history of our world, both socially, politically, whatever it may be, has really helped and educating me. And a lot of that has come through books and poetry. It came through reading Brown Girl Dreaming. It came through watching Toni Morrison's speeches. It came through this education. So what role do you think that books and poetry should or have played in social justice movements today?
Oh, just what you said. I mean, you're such a great reader, Marley, and so thoughtful about this. I love talking to you. And I know you're not a unicorn. I know, and that there's so many people out there that are thinking deeply about reading, especially our young people, right? And they're when allowed to, learning from the literature they're reading. And even though writers aren't uh, putting that literature on the page to teach a lesson, we're not writing textbooks, we're writing stories that, as you know, you can fall into and get lost into and come out of different. And that difference is that social justice, that I want to change the world that let A, B, and C happen. I want to change the world in which this person is not seen as a part of my community. I want to change the world in which this person is being oppressed in some way. So I think that poetry, when we look at books like Claudia Rankine's Citizen, when we look at anything that Tracy K. Smith has written. Like, people are constantly having these conversations inside the narrative about not only how we can be better humans, but how the world can be more generous to all folks. And I think for me, when I sit down to write, it is to say, well, when I finish this book, how is it going to change me? How am I going to be better because of the questions I've asked in this book? And I think the same does happen for kids. I might have moved way away from your question.
No, you did not. Never,
Okay.
never. And such a thoughtful answer. And as we wrap this up, the big question is that I think all the kids that are watching this want to know is that once we fly, what comes next?
More flying.
Great answer. Yes, more flying.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's not just one destination, right? There are plenty of places you can go to and plenty of lives you can have and plenty of opportunities. And I'm not just, Jacqueline Woodson, the writer. I'm a whole lot of people flying inside of this body. And I think for so many young people, you don't have to choose just one way of flying. It's the sky's the limit and beyond it. So go fly, I say.
Go fly. Thank you so much for being here today to make this beautiful reading connection about the year we learned to fly. All of us at NEA appreciate you, and we hope that you have happy reading always.
Thank you, Marley. We so appreciate you, and thanks for your gorgeous words and work in the world.
Thank you.